Hello everyone and welcome, and hello everyone joining us from home. It's lovely to see you all. A few familiar faces, but mostly new faces. So lovely to meet you all here. Welcome. So just be aware of your current experience without trying to change it or manipulate it in any way whatsoever. Your thoughts, feelings, sensations on the inside, and your perceptions of the world on the outside. And now, be aware of the space in this room, or in the room for those of you at home that you are sitting in. As soon as I mention the space of this room, you seem suddenly to become aware of it. But in fact, you were aware of the space before I mentioned it, but you may not have noticed it. Why? Because your attention was drawn to the more interesting, colourful, demanding aspects of your experience, your thoughts, your feelings, memories, the sensations of your body, the sight of this room, the words that I am speaking, and so on. All of these captured your attention, and although you were undoubtedly experiencing the space in this room, you may have overlooked it. The space is relative to the rest of your experience. The space in this room is so empty, so transparent, so silent that you overlook it in favor of the more interesting content of your experience. But as soon as I draw your attention to it, you realize, of course, I was experiencing it all the time. I just overlooked it. Now, close your eyes and become aware of your breath. Again, as soon as I mention your breath, you seem suddenly to become aware of it. In fact, you were previously aware of it, just as you are always experiencing physical space in the waking state. You are always experiencing your breath. But in comparison with the rest of your experience, your breath is so quiet, so transparent. It calls for so little attention that you overlook it or ignore it in favor of the more interesting, colourful, demanding aspects of your experience, your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and so on. As soon as I mention the breath, you have that strange experience of seeming to suddenly become aware of something which in fact you were aware of all along. Now, be aware of the experience of simply being. As soon as I draw your attention to the experience of just being, you seem suddenly to become aware of it. But you were in fact aware of being all along, before I drew your attention to it. But like the space of this room, like your breath, your being is so empty, so silent, so transparent, so still, that you do not notice it, you overlook it in favor of the more colourful, interesting aspects of your experience. In fact, unlike even physical space and the experience of your breath, which have some small degree of objectivity to them, the experience of being has no objective features at all. It cannot be perceived, or felt, or known in the way all other experience is known. And yet, at the same time, you cannot say that you are not having the experience of just being. The experience of just being is your most intimate, most familiar, most ordinary experience there is. But it is because it is so colourless, so transparent, so silent, that you overlook it, ignore it, or forget it. And instead, give your attention almost exclusively to the content of your experience. think it is probably true to say that everybody here and everyone at home is on some kind of a spiritual path. And that this path involves some kind of method or practice drawn from one of the great religious or spiritual traditions. All those great religious and spiritual traditions and the practices and methods that they elaborate originate from a single experience. The awareness of being. The awareness of being, if it can be called an experience, is the experience from which all the great religious and spiritual traditions and all the methods, pathways and practices that they elaborate are founded. So when you go in this way to the experience of simply being, when you soften the focus of your attention from the content of your experience and you relax back into the awareness of simply being, you are going to that experience from which all the great religious and spiritual traditions have evolved. And all the pathways, all the methods, all the practices, the meditations, the prayers, the yogas and everything, that these traditions elaborate, culminate in a single experience. They are preparations for a single experience. The awareness of being. The awareness of being is, as such, the source, the ultimate path, if we can call it a path, and the goal. Of all the great religious and spiritual traditions. It is the Alpha and the Omega. The origin, the path, and the goal. The awareness of just being. The awareness of being, the experience of just being, is the first and last knowledge. Before you know anything about yourself, you know that you are. Before you know that you are excited or lonely or sad or cold or tired, you know that you are. Before you know that you are married or single, before you know that you are healthy or sick, before you know that you are a doctor or an artist or a cab driver or a cook, you know that you are. Before you know that you are a man or a woman, you know that you are. Before even you know that you are a human being, you know your being. Untouched, unqualified by any human experience. In other words, even before you know that you are a human being, you know that you are being. You know that I am. As such, the knowing of being is your primary, innermost, most fundamental experience. In the Zen tradition, it's what they refer to when they say, it's what you are before you were born. In other words, before experience was born in you. Prior to any experience, you simply are, unqualified, unconditioned. And the experience of being is not just your primary experience. Not just your first experience, it is your last experience, the last experience you will ever have. When all your faculties have left you, all your faculties of thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting and smelling, when these have all left you, all that will remain is the awareness of just being. And your very first experience of just being, and your last experience of just being, are identical. nothing that happened in the intervening years will have affected your being. That is, will have affected yourself. Because your sense of yourself is derived not from your thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions. These are not your essential self, but your self is derived from the fact of being. No experience that takes place in your life affects, changes, ages, or hurts or harms your being. Your being is always in the same pristine, transparent, empty, luminous, peaceful condition. Your being touches all experience intimately, but no experience touches it. That is, no experience touches you. as you go through life, your being becomes, or seems to become, mixed with the content of experience. It seems to acquire the properties or the qualities of your thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, activities and relationships. And this mixture of your essential, irreducible self or being with the content of your experience creates a temporary, finite self or ego that you seem to become. The apparently separate self or ego derives its selfness from pure being, but it derives its qualities, its characteristics, its limitations from the content of experience. In other words, the apparently separate self or ego that you seem to be is a mixture of unlimited being plus the limitations of experience. And the inevitable consequence of this forgetting or overlooking of who we truly are, this allowing of ourselves to be conditioned by experience, the inevitable consequence of this is a sense of lack on the inside, sorrow on the inside, and separation or conflict on the outside. And in order to relieve the discomfort of this sorrow and conflict, we embark on a great journey. First of all, a conventional journey in the world, seeking objects, substances, activities, relationships, and so on. Then our great search becomes a little bit more refined. We begin to search in the religious and spiritual traditions. But our great search is motivated by one thing alone: to be divested of the limitations that we derive from the content of experience, and to stand again as we truly are, unqualified, unconditioned being. In other words, our life is really a journey from being to being. I don't mean to imply that you go back to something you once were. No, I mean to imply that the whole journey of life is to take you to who you truly are now. Not some extraordinary, mystical, enlightened self that you might become, but the self that you are now. The self that you always have been, or more accurately, eternally are, prior to and independent of the content of experience. This great surge that takes us from ourself to ourself was beautifully expressed by the English poet T.S. Eliot in his epic poem, The Four Quartets. When he said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." I was having dinner with a few new friends before this meeting this evening, and they were talking about how long they had been aware of my work. And one of them turned to me and asked jokingly, "And how long have you known yourself?" But it's a beautiful question. And the moment she asked the question, my attention went back to myself, and the experience of being shone there, as if for the first time, fresh, new, pristine, not a memory of my being, but my being, our being, pure being. Before it is conditioned by experience. And there is no time in that experience. You don't reach into your memory to become aware of your being. You reach into your current experience. And when you touch your being, when you taste your being, it is fresh, new. It has no age. It has never been tarnished by experience. It has no gender. It has no shape. It has no size. It does not share the qualities or the limitations that pertain to your mind or your body. And thus it is without limits or infinite. All paths, all the great religious and spiritual traditions originate from this simple awareness of being. And they all take you, sooner or later, more or less directly, to your essential self. The experience of just being. So at some point, all the methods, the pathways, the practices, they have done their job. They have taken you to yourself. And all that remains is to sink more and more deeply into that. To abide as that. It's what Meister Eckhart referred to when he said, when you come to the one that gathers all things into itself, there you must stay. Okay, let's leave it there for this evening. Thank you.